Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leak. I'm John as always, and it's time for the last monocolored set review for Shadows over Innistrad. We're going to be talking about all of the green cards today in a limited perspective. Of course, there are three disclaimers. One is that this is a limited set review. For the others, of course, you can go back and watch the previous reviews, which you should have already, or you should go and do at some point. You don't want to just learn about one color, you want to learn about all five. Tomorrow will be the last set review. I've decided to put all of the multicolored and artifact and lands into one single review because the lands will go by pretty darn quickly because there's two cycles in there that I can cover in one fell swoop. So tomorrow will be multicolored artifacts, lands, and kind of my perspective of the format going into the pre-release weekend. But without further ado, we're going to jump right on into the first card. Up first, we have Aim High. Aim High is 1 and a green for an instant common. It says on tap, target creature, it gets +2/+2 and gains reach until end of turn. We're starting to get a little bit close to Giant Growth. Giant Growth, of course, was a single green for +3/+3. We haven't seen the likes of that in a while, at least that cheap. This is just 1 mana more and a single power and toughness less, plus we get reach. This just seems like a solid combat trick to me. I would probably main deck the first of these in most of my green decks. I'm not excited, of course, by this. It is just a combat trick. But +2/+2 is sizable enough that you'll often, at a bare minimum, trade in combat, if not win in combat. And reach, of course, is something that green desperately needs. Green is historically weak to flyers, and this is a great way of kind of solving that. I'm willing to go as high as C+ on this. I think it's just a solid all-around combat trick. I'm not going to go out of my way to pick these. I'm going to pick it pretty late in the pack even, but I'll play the first one, I think, and I won't feel too bad about it. C+. Next up, we have Autumnal Gloom. Autumnal Gloom is 2 and a green for an enchantment at uncommon. It has an activated ability, pay a black mana, put the top card of your library into your graveyard. Delirium, at the beginning of your end step, if you have Delirium, transform Autumnal Gloom. It flips on over and it becomes Ancient of the Equinox. Ancient of the Equinox is a creature, tree folk, 4/4, trample, hexproof. This is interesting. It's an interesting card. I like it. I like the mechanics behind it. I like the flavor behind it. It's almost like the leaves are falling and this tree folk is bursting out of them by the end of it. It seems a little bit of work to get going, though. If you can get there, it's a decent enough beater, albeit one that still gets killed off by a pair of 2/2s. You know, trample hexproof, that's cool. But 4/4 does get beaten by 2/2s. You know, it's not invincible. Wears auras really well, wears equipment really well, but, you know, we've been here before with things like that 5/1 hexproof tree folk. It's tricky. It looks really good, but unless you can pump it up a whole lot, it does still die to just normal combat. Seems fun, though, and it seems like a nice way to kind of try to force Delirium online through blind flips off the top of your library. But that's not really how I want to do Delirium. I want cards to go naturally from my hand or from the battlefield into the graveyard, or I want to know what's going into my graveyard. I don't want to just be blind flipping, because I'm going to get lands and creatures in there really fast anyways, just through playing the game and through blind flipping. It's getting those final 2 cards that's going to be tricky, and I don't want to leave that up to just blind flips off the top. So I'm not super sold on this. It seems a bit too inconsistent. I'm going to keep my eye on it, because of course black-green seems like a decent enough Delirium kind of deck, but I think black-white is where Delirium is going to truly live. I don't know how this is going to shape up. I'm very curious to see it in action, but I'm going to start out a little bit cautious on a C-. I'm going to watch other people play this to start. I'm not going to be the one to play it. Next up, we have Briar Bridge Patrol. Briar Bridge Patrol is 3 and a green for a creature human warrior at uncommon. It's a 3/3. When Briar Bridge Patrol, which is a mouthful to say, deals damage to 1 or more creatures, investigate. At the beginning of each end step, if you sacrificed 3 or more clues this turn, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Interesting. It's a 3/3 for 4, so it's fine. It's a hill giant. It investigates when it hits creatures, which is cool enough. Works kind of nicely on defense even, because you'll still get those clue tokens. The second ability, though, I just think is kind of magical Christmas, pie in the sky land. I don't see sacking 3 clues in one turn a thing that's going to happen in Limited all that often. That's 6 mana, which means that you should be able to cast whatever creature you would put out for free. Now, yeah, it's going to be better to draw 3 cards and put that creature out for 6 mana rather than just put that creature out. But I don't know, it just seems a little bit too cute, a little bit too everything is going right for me. Now I'm going to make it go even more right for me, also known as win more, to really try to go off with this card. I think it's interesting, and I think it's a card that maybe you can have for your Clues Matter deck anyways, because it's going to make a lot of clues by itself. But that second ability, I just don't know. I feel like it's a little bit too out there for me to get too excited about this card. It is still totally fine. It's still a C+. It's still a card that I would have played even if that second ability didn't exist. Yeah, I'm not massively excited by it, but I'm going to put it in my green deck every time I have it, and I'm not going to, avoid it in any way when I'm drafting. C+. Next up, we have Byway Courier. Byway Courier is 2 and a green for a creature human scout at common. It's a 3/2. When Byway Courier dies, investigate. Yeah, it's a 3/2 for 3, which is, again, fine. You'll play it here and there, and, you get a clue when it dies, which is okay. The first one seems totally playable, but not massively exciting in any way, shape, or form. It's just kind of a nice way to get some clues, and if it's not dying and you're not getting clues, then you're probably attacking in with a 3/2, which is generally fine as well. Just like Briarbridge, it's not exciting, it's not splashy, but I'll take it, and I'll play the first one, so C+. Next up, we have Clip Wings. Clip Wings is 1 and a green for an instant at common. Each opponent sacrifices a creature with flying. Sideboard only. This is kind of pure definition of a D. This is a card that you should never main deck in almost all formats. Every now and then you'll get a format where flyers are rampant, and sideboard or main decking a plummet effect like this card is something that you can do. But this is not looking like a format. There's a fair number of spirits, but it's not looking like a format where I would main board a plummet. And this is a bad plummet at that, to be honest. You don't even get to target the creature that you want to be dead. You target the opponent, and they choose which flyer they want to be dead. So if they have a 6/6 demon that's going to smack you and draw them cards or something, and they also have a 1/1 spirit token, well, guess what creature is dying? Not the demon. So this isn't even a D. This is a D-. This is a bad plummet. Hopefully there's just one flyer that you're looking at, but if there's more, you're going to be in trouble with this card. So totally not main boardable, and sideboardable only when you see flyers and you can't deal with them, which you may not be able to in green. So, D-. We don't get plummet, so maybe it should just be a D, but sideboard only, don't main deck it. Next up, we have Confront the Unknown. Confront the Unknown is a single green mana for an instant at common. Investigate. Then, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each clue you control. I don't like this. I know the clue deck's going to be a thing, and I know everybody's excited about it, and they want to play the blue-green Clues Matters deck. This is such a ridiculously conditional pump spell, though, that I don't think I want to touch it. It will be a +1/+1 spell a non-zero amount of the time. You're not going to have clues. You need a serious critical mass of clue producers for this to even reliably hit giant growth levels, at which point it's fine. If you can get +3/+3, it's okay. It's giant growth, which is decent. If you can get more than that, cool, but it's going to be a hard deck to draft. You have to be very careful on the amount of clue producers and ways to get clues that you're getting, and things that actually impact the board and do stuff. It's going to be a tricky line to walk. I'm definitely interested in seeing where it goes and if it's viable or not, but I just don't think that this card is something you want to be playing in that deck. I think this is a trap card for that deck. You want to avoid it. I've got to go with a D+ on it. I don't want to play it. Next up, we have Crawling Sensation. Crawling Sensation is 2 and a green for an enchantment at uncommon. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere for the first time each turn, put a 1/1 green insect creature token onto the battlefield. Also, no, I don't want to play this card either. 3 cards in a row. At least Clipwings with sideboard. Optionally mill yourself 2 each turn to hopefully get a 1/1 is not exciting. You're probably going to be playing this because you're the Delirium deck, not because you're desperately trying to get those 1/1 insects. It really sucks that it's the first time a land hits the graveyard, so if you do hit 2 lands, you still just get a single insect out of it. I'd really need to be getting 3 1/1s out of this before I would even slightly consider it to be worth it. So I'm just super out on this card. Even in the Delirium deck, I don't think this is what I want to be doing to make Delirium go online. I don't see the point of these insects. I don't really see why I would want to be going for these. I'm out on this card. I think it's super narrow. I think it's another trap card. Total D for me. I'm out on it. All right, I promise there are some good cards in green coming. Let's see if this is one of them. Cryptolith Rite. Cryptolith Rite is 1 and a green for an enchantment at rare. Creatures you control have tap. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. This seems like a decent enough ramp spell. Making every single creature you have into a mana dork is kind of cool. It plays very nicely in a token deck, maybe even with those 1/1 insects, especially because you're throwing away a land in order to get the insects out. Now they produce mana. Who knows? Maybe that's something. I doubt it. But still, this is pretty build around, so I think you want to take this pack 1, pick 1, or I think you want to take it pretty early on. Taking this pack 2 or 3 likely means your deck isn't going to be built quite well enough to really truly support this. And of course, you don't want to build and hope you open this because it's a rare. You're not going to see it. Seems like fun, and it could help enable kind of a 4 or 5 color good stuff deck. I don't think it's first pickable. I think if you want to use it, you need to first pick it, but I don't think it's actually first pickable. I don't think that's a wise thing to do. I don't think this is a super powerful enough card. I think it's cool, and I think it's going to help enable a 4 or 5 color good stuff deck. I don't know if it'll be good, but it's definitely something you could do if you do get this pack 1, pick 1. I'll keep my eyes on it. It's not something that I'm going to go for at the start of the format, but it is an option for those who are feeling a little bit courageous. So I'm going to go with a C+. I think it's fine, but not amazing. Next up, we have Cult of the Waxing Moon. Cult of the Waxing Moon is 4 and a green for a creature human shaman at uncommon. It's a 5/4. Whenever a permanent you control transforms into a non-human creature, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. It's a little bit expensive and bland on its own, but it can interact somewhat nicely with your werewolves. I feel like this is likely going to come down a little bit too late for you to get too much value out of it. So I don't expect to go out of my way to want to play this, but if I'm already in red-green werewolves, I would give it a go for sure. My real problem is that it is a 5-drop, so a lot of the werewolves that I'm really excited to play and really think are going to be good are 2-drops, 3-drops, 4-drops. Yeah, they may not transform until later in the game, or maybe they go back to humans and then go back to werewolves, and I get more 2/2 wolf tokens out of it. But I think it's just ever so slightly late to be like a broken card that's going to generate me, 10 wolves or something like that. I think it's still going to generate me a good number of wolves, and it is a 5/4 on its own. So I think it's a totally fine card, and I would definitely main deck it every single time I'm playing red-green wolves. Outside of red-green wolves, I'm not terribly sure. A lot of the other humans that transform are still humans on their backside. So I don't think this has as big a place in green-white, for example. But in green-red, I would always main deck it, and I'd be happy to have it. So C+. Next up, we have Deathcap Cultivator. Deathcap Cultivator is 1 and a green for a creature human druid at rare. It's a 2/1. Tap, add black or green to your mana pool. Delirium. Deathcap Cultivator has Death Touch if you have Delirium. Blah. I love this card. It's a 2-mana, 2/1 mana dork that does 2 colors. I hate that it's a rare, though. I really hate that this is a rare. It just doesn't feel like a rare. Getting Death Touch sometimes doesn't really feel like this should be a rare to me. Generating 2 colors of mana doesn't really feel like this should be a rare to me. This is first pickable in weak packs, just like Golden Hind was in Journey to Nyx, but I think generally you want to treat this as something that should ideally be taken a little bit more towards the middle of the pack. You'll always play it, and you'll always be happy to have it, but generally you should be taking better stuff earlier on in the packs. I hate that this is a rare, but I'm going to love having it, and I'm going to love playing it. I'm just going to hate opening this and this being my rare. B-, I will always play it and be quite happy to have it. It's not amazing. It's not a bomb. It's just solid utility. So B-. Next up, we have Duskwatch Recruiter. Duskwatch Recruiter is 1 and a green for a creature, human, warrior, werewolf at uncommon. It's a 2/2, and it says, pay 2 and a green, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And then it has the werewolf flip ability. It flips into Crawlin' Horde Howler. Crawlin' Horde Howler is a creature werewolf 3/3 that says creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And of course it has the werewolf flip back ability. Yeah, this seems like a totally solid card to me. I mean, it's a 2/2 for 2, and sometimes a 3/3 for 2 when it flips over, which it's totally fine. It has pure upside on it. On the day side, you can dig for your creatures if you have nothing better to do. It's probably not going to come up too often, but you could even dig in response to the flip trigger before it flips over. I'm not sure if there's any specific reason that would be amazing to do, but it's there. And then on the night side, those creatures you dug up cost 1 less to cast. It seems fine. Getting multiples of these would be awesome. If your creatures started costing 2 less to cast, that would be just fantastic. I'm pretty happy with this card, and I think it's likely a mildly high pick. Probably not quite first pickable, but still a relatively high pick. I think this is going to make red-green kind of monsters, kind of werewolves be a super solid deck. I'd be very happy to play the first of these, and I would be even happier if I got multiples of them. I'm super happy with this. Just solid B+. Next up, we have Equestrian Skill. Equestrian Skill is 3 and a green for an enchantment aura at common. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3 as long as enchanted creature is a human. It has trample. Yeah. There's some auras in this set that are really tempting me. It's really tempting me. Either they have, the return to graveyard ability, or they also function as bounce spells, or there's one tomorrow that I know I shouldn't be tempted by, but I am. But this one just doesn't do it for me. 4 mana for +3/+3 and trample is fine, but it offers absolutely no value to protect against the usual blowout weakness of auras. If the creature this is on dies, if it gets blown out by some little piddly spell or something, I lose 2 cards, and I don't know. I'm just not feeling this card. It's not very good for me. It obviously has to be specifically in a heavy humans deck, so probably green-white. Arguably red-green pre-werewolf flip when they're still humans. But yeah, this aura, some of them are tempting me, but this one's just not. I've got to go with a D+. I think I might play it out of the sideboard sometimes, but I'm never really going to main deck this spell, so D+. Next up, we have Fork in the Road. Fork in the Road is 1 and a green for a sorcery at common. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and reveal them. Put 1 into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Then shuffle your library. Hand in graveyard? No thanks. No thanks. Battle in graveyard, sure. I would play a Rampant Growth that helps Delirium, totally. I would play that card. But hand in graveyard, this doesn't ramp me. It's ridiculously slow. It helps you slightly fix your mana. If you are going 3 colors, 4 colors, 5 colors, maybe this is something you want to do. It helps with Delirium kind of nicely because, of course, you're getting a sorcery and a land into the graveyard. So you're halfway to Delirium just by casting the spell, and that's pretty nice. And that's where I think this is going to have the best utility, is getting 2 cards, and you're not blind flipping. You know exactly that you're going to be 50% of the way to Delirium just by casting that spell. And that's the single place where I see this card being playable. In any other situation, I don't think I want to main deck this card ever. So I'm going to go with a D+ on it. If you are really looking to enable Delirium, you just have incredible Delirium creatures, you need Delirium to be online or else your deck is not going to work, then yeah, this is a card you're looking for because it's a guaranteed 50% on right away. Any other situation, I don't think you should main deck this, so D+. Next up, we've got a reprint from Avacyn Restored, Gloom Widow. Gloom Widow is 2 and a green for a creature spider at uncommon. It's a 3/3, it's got reach, and Gloom Widow can block only creatures with flying. every single time I read this, and even when I read it back when it was in Avacyn Restored, I always think that it has Defender, or for whatever reason, I forget that it can just attack, and it's really good, just like the 3/3 for 3 in red. I can't remember the name of it offhand. Howling Wolf, maybe, that can't block unless you have a werewolf. This is the same thing. It's totally fine. It's a 3/3 for 3 that I will swing in with and be super aggressive with and just attack like crazy. And sometimes I'm going to be up against blue-white flyers or blue X flyers or white X flyers, and I'm suddenly going to have a way to block those things and handle them pretty nicely for just 3 mana. This is just a totally fine card. It's not amazing. It's just a nice, solidly aggressive creature that sometimes is going to help you a little bit more than that by being a reachy blocker. Nice to see it back from the original block. Totally fine pick. You're not going to go, super high on this. You're not going to take this, first pick or second pick or anything like that. But you're going to play it every single time and be decently happy with it. So C+. Next up, we have Graph Mole. Graph Mole is 2 and a green for a creature mole beast at uncommon. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, you gain 3 life. This is a 2/4 for 3. I haven't seen that in a long time. 2/4 is always 4 mana. 2/4 for 3 for upside is just super solid. The upside's minimal unless you're going really deep on clues. If you're the blue-green clues deck, you're going to have a good amount of life. Who knows if you're going to have a way of finishing the game, but you're going to have a good amount of life. Still, this is just strangely undercosted for its stats. I have no idea how this got away with being a 3-drop when it's a 2/4. So strange. Anyways, you should always play the first one of this, regardless of what deck you're in. If you're in green, you should be playing this card. It's a 2/4 for 3. That's not really heard of. If you're in clues, even better than that. But who knows if that clues deck is going to work out. I don't have high hopes for it, but I'll keep an eye on it. But even regardless of that, you're always going to play the first one of these and never ever cut it because it's super, not super undercosted, but it's undercosted for what it is. So C+. Next up, we have Groundskeeper. Groundskeeper is a single green mana for a creature human druid at uncommon. It's a 1/1, and for 1 and a green, you can return target basic land card from your graveyard to your hand. Why does this card exist? Why is it an uncommon? I guess it's an uncommon because returning something from graveyard to hand isn't terribly a common ability, but this card just seems super useless to me. It turns off your delirium. It's not even active if you don't have a land in the graveyard. I don't know why you're desperately trying to get land back from your graveyard, why you're paying 2 mana for it, why you're playing a 1/1 for 1. I don't get this card. I feel like it must be for something else entirely, whether it's something that's going to be relevant in the next set when Eldritch Moon comes out, whether this was meant for Constructed, but I just don't see the point of this card in the limited format. I never want to play this card. F. I don't see the point of it. Just total F. Next up, we have Hermit of the Natterknolls. Hermit of the Natterknolls is 2 and a green for a creature human werewolf at uncommon. It's a 2/3. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, draw a card. And it has the werewolf flip ability. It flips into Lone Wolf of the Natterknolls. Lone Wolf of the Natterknolls is a creature werewolf. It's a 3/5. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, draw 2 cards. And it has the werewolf flip back ability. 2/3 for 3 isn't great. And you're going to draw what? 1 card off of this in a normal game, maybe 2? 3 if you're super duper lucky. If you can flip this before those spells get played, you get twice that much, which is really solid. That's a ton of card draw. But still, in limited, your opponent isn't just slinging spells left and right on your turn. My usual instant and sorcery, and in this case, instant rant. There's going to be, 4 instants in your opponent's hand or in your opponent's deck. With Madness in play, let's go up to 6. I just don't think you're going to get too many cards off of this. The 3/5 on the flip side, though, is nice for 3 mana, so I think this is still playable, and I think the card draw is just kind of pure bonus on top. I don't think you should ever expect it. I don't think you should pick this card going, haha, I'm going to draw 7 cards every single game. You may very well draw 0 cards. you're still going to have a 2/3, which is okay, and then you're going to have a 3/5, which is fine. And when the stars align and when your opponent casts spells on your turn, you're going to get some cards off of it, and that's going to be a cool bonus. Don't expect it, though. Don't get into this card for that reason. Get into this card because it's a decent filler creature that has some bonuses some of the times. So C+, I'll play it, and I will be happy when I get those card draws, but I'm not expecting it to happen all the time. Next up, we have Hinterland Logger. Hinterland Logger is 1 and a green for a creature human werewolf at common. It's a 2/1, and it just has the werewolf flip ability, nothing else. On the backside, it is a Timber Shredder. That's a 4/2 creature werewolf with trample and the flip back ability. So this is a simple French vanilla werewolf. It's a 2/1 for 2, which is slightly below par. We expect 2/2s for 2. And a 4/2 trample is pretty ridiculously weak. 4/2 dies to a lot of things. A lot of things. At least it has trample, so it'll probably get through for a couple points of damage when it dies, but I don't really see this as something that I'm going to be, super going out of my way to play, because it is just going to die a whole heck of a lot of the time. So ultimately, I think it's just kind of pure filler level. I will go a straight middle of the road C. I'll play this sometimes if I'm a little bit low on creatures or if I'm a little bit low on 2-drops. This looks like it might be a 2-drops kind of matters format. Nothing like Origins at all, but still, you want to be playing 2-drops. So in that case, I would play it, and in other cases, I would pitch this if I had anything better than that. Next up, we have Howlpack Resurgence. Howlpack Resurgence is 2 and a green for an enchantment at uncommon. It has flash, and each creature you control that's a wolf or a werewolf gets +1/+1 and has trample. This is obviously totally deck dependent. Do you have a lot of werewolves? This card's basically an anthem for your deck. A flash anthem at that, with a French vanilla ability tapped onto it. Totally fantastic. In that deck, this is maybe a B? Maybe even a B+ if you're totally werewolves. If you only have a few wolves, then this is more like a C- or even lower. If you don't have any wolves, obviously it's a flat out F. So this card really doesn't have one grade. This is an F or a C- or a B+. I think the main thing to take home with this is that this is something that you need to either take and decide that you are going to take every single red-green werewolf that you see, and I don't know if that's a wise idea, or this is something that you just kind of get rewarded for being red-green werewolves and open this up late pack 2 or pack 3 or something like that. That being said, you should, assuming everybody's drafting well, you should be able to get this if you are the red-green werewolves drafter at the table and nobody else is really going in on it. But yeah, this is totally deck dependent. There's no one real grade for this one. So F, C-, B+, B+, whatever it is for your deck. Next up, we have Inexorable Blob. Inexorable Blob is 2 and a green for a creature ooze at rare. It's a 3/3. It's got Delirium. Whenever Inexorable Blob, that is hard to say, attacks, if you have Delirium, put a 3/3 green ooze creature token onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. So it's a 3/3 for 3. Totally fine. Passes the vanilla test. Better than a Hill Giant. If your Delirium is on, you get more 3/3s whenever you attack. Cool, that's fine. This really depends on Delirium's consistency, of course. You've heard me talk about this over and over and over. If it's consistent, if you can definitely get it online, this will be pretty darn solid. But it is still just a vanilla 3/3. If you're able to attack in with this without concern in order to get that other 3/3, it probably means there's no blockers or there's nothing that's going to handle this 3/3, which really kind of makes this a little bit win more. If I can attack in with a 3/3 unimpeded, I should just be winning the game. I don't need this card to be getting in there. Still, it is just a pure vanilla pass 3/3 for 3, which makes it an absolute card in your deck anyways. The fact that sometimes you'll get some bonuses out of this is going to push this up to a B- to me. I don't think it's a first pick in any way, shape, or form. I think it is just kind of a solid creature and a little bit win more, but still fine by itself. Next up, we have Intrepid Provisioner. Intrepid Provisioner is 3 and a green for a creature human scout at common. It's a 3/3. It's got trample, and when Intrepid Provisioner enters the battlefield, another target human you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Seems decent. It's a 3/3 for 4 with trample, and a bonus if you're in green X humans, probably green white humans. But as I was saying, in green red werewolves, this still works because you're going to have a lot of humans on the day side of the werewolves. It's totally playable. It's not amazing. I wouldn't go out of my way for it, but I'd main deck the first one, maybe even the second one, especially if I was in a super solid humans deck. So C+, not exciting, but totally fine. Next up, we have Kessig Dire Swine. Kessig Dire Swine is 4 and a green for a creature boar horror. It's common, and it's a 6/6. It has Delirium. Kessig Dire Swine has Trample, as long as you have Delirium. This card basically says if you have Delirium, this creature becomes somewhat playable. If you don't, it's not really that playable. If you don't have Delirium, this is just a 6/6 for 6, which technically passes the vanilla test, but the vanilla test falls off after kind of 5/5s. A 6/6 for 6 that does nothing, it's just not good enough. When you're paying 6 mana into something, you need something that's going to be, answer this now or die. It needs to be a 6/6 flyer. It needs to have evasion on it. It needs to have a really cool ability. If it's just a vanilla 6/6, it's just not very good and generally not worth it in a deck, especially when it's double color, so when it's green-green. If it has Trample, it's a little bit better. It's got not the best of evasion, but it's gonna, your opponent can't just chump block it for forever because they're still gonna take some damage. So, if you're dedicated to Delirium and you can reliably get it on by the time this comes out, this is okay. It's still not amazing. You want something more for your 6 mana than just a 6/6 Trample. You want an effect. You want something going on with it. So I'm generally gonna cut this more often than not. So that makes this a C- for me. It's just not exciting. It's just not exciting enough at all. C-. Next up, we have Lambholt Pacifist. Lambholt Pacifist is 1 and a green for a creature, human, shaman, werewolf at uncommon. It's a 3/3. Lambholt Pacifist can't attack unless you control a creature with power 4 or greater. And it has the werewolf flip ability. It flips over to Lambholt Butcher, creature werewolf 4/4 with the werewolf flip back ability. So it's a 3/3 that probably can't attack for a pretty serious chunk of the game. For 2 mana. It's not great, but it's also not the worst, especially for 2 mana. We remember Glade Watcher from Origins? No, it had Ferocious on it, so it must have been Dragons of Tarkir, I think. Glade Watcher could be turned on by paying a green mana. You did have to have 5 other power on the board. This does have the downside, though, that it doesn't require, just having 8 power total like Glade Watcher did. This requires you to have a 4x or bigger before it can attack. That is definitely a downside, whereas Glade Watcher could have been turned on if you had a 3/3 and a 2/2. If this flips, you have an okay threat. It's a vanilla 4/4. If it flips on turn 2, you've really made it. And you could even slightly consider just passing turn 3 without playing anything to have a 4/4. You do run into the possibility of your opponent having 2 spells to play to flip it back, and then you've just wasted a turn entirely. But if they don't, you have a 4/4 that might be able to attack in somewhat unimpeded. I still don't think I want to do that. Just from my experience with the original Innistrad, I never really liked passing a turn when I could have cast something instead. Generally, you always want to cast whatever you can, and you want to get your werewolf flips when you have no other choice, or when you get lucky and your opponent can't cast things. Passing a turn to get a werewolf flip, there better be a very good reason. There better be an amazing flip ability that's going to happen or something like that. But yeah, this has some upsides to it, and I think it's fine enough that you'll still play it for 2. It's a little bit more defensive. It doesn't quite fit into the super aggro kind of werewolf deck. This is a little bit more mid-rangey of a creature, I think. So I've got to go with a C+ on it. I think it's fine, and I'll probably play the first one, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see if it can flip terribly reliably. Next up, we have Loam Dryad. Loam Dryad is a single green mana for a creature Dryad Horror. It's a common. It's a 1/2. Tap an untapped creature you control. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It's Holdout Settlement. It's Holdout Settlement, except it now costs a mana to cast it, and it's massively vulnerable because it's a 1/2. If you're in 4 or 5 color good stuff, then this might be kind of what you want. But if you're not, I would not touch this thing with a 10-foot pole. This format's looking like it might be a touch fast, so I don't know if you can really go 4 or 5 color good stuff. I don't think I don't think you can really mess around with cute little things like this. This just doesn't seem what I want to really be doing. It kind of ramps you, but at the cost of 2 creatures. Not really what I want to be doing. Too cute for me. I've got to go with a D+ on it. Maybe if 4 or 5 color good stuff is a deck, then you might want to give this a try, but it's not for me. I don't like to get that cute, so D+. Next up, we have Might Beyond Reason. Might Beyond Reason is 3 and a green for an instant at common. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Delirium. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on that creature instead if you have Delirium. So this obviously is very similar to Dragon Scale Boon, which was the exact same cost for an instant. It did the exact same thing, except it untapped the creature. And of course, it didn't have the Delirium extra. That had a lot more versatility, because you could bluff your opponent into attacking into a tapped-out board and then suddenly have a much bigger creature untapped. You lose that in favor of sometimes getting an extra counter, which is not a good deal to me. Not a good deal. This makes this a much less useful, much less versatile trick. It's pretty 23rd cardy to me. I'll play it if I have to. You know, if I'm at 22 and I need another playable, I'll put it in. I won't feel too bad about it, but I'm going to cut it whenever I can, so C-. Next up, we have Moldgraph Scavenger. Moldgraph Scavenger is 1 and a green for a 0/4 creature fungus at common. It has Delirium. Moldgraph Scavenger gets +3/+0 as long as you have Delirium. Yeah, so a giant mushroom. A giant mushroom. It's an 0/4 wall early on, and then someday, maybe, it's a 3/4. Unfortunately, I think it really needs to be a 3/4 before turn 4, or before turn 5. Any later than that, it's going to probably be kind of outclassed by everything else. You know, were you ever terribly excited to play your Vestige of Emrakul on turn 6? No, you wanted to play that on curve on turn 4. Any later than that, and it got outclassed. I think that the exact same thing will happen here with Moldgraph Scavenger. If it's not a 3/4 before turn 4, it's just not going to do it for me. So I think I'm going to cut this pretty regularly. Maybe side it in if I'm up against some super aggro, because it will function as a wall. It will function as just a way to, you know, stop those 2 and 3 powered creatures from getting in too aggressively. Also turns off Skulk as well, so I think it's a decent enough sideboard card. I just don't think I'm going to main deck it. I'll cut it pretty regularly, so C-. Next up, we have Moonlight Hunt. Moonlight Hunt is 1 and a green for an instant at uncommon. Choose target creature you don't control. Each creature you control that's a wolf or a werewolf deals damage equal to its power to that creature. Just like that card that I'm trying to think of the name of that I talked about, Howlpack Resurgence, this is obviously a 100% conditional card. If you don't have very many wolves, I'd probably say if you have 5 or less wolves in your deck, this is probably an F. It's unplayable. You should not put it in. If you're the red-green werewolves deck, this is much more like a B-. It's conditional, situational, but super solid removal. Keep in mind, even the human side of the werewolves are still werewolves, so they will still count for this. So you don't have to have them flipped in order for this to be online. Either side of a werewolf card will be able to use this card. So yeah, this is totally deck dependent. It's an F or it's a B-. You should know which one it is, and make sure that you're in that deck before you take this. I don't think it'll be right to take this and hope that you get enough wolves. Next up is Obsessive Skinner. Obsessive Skinner is 1 and a green for a creature human rogue at uncommon. It's a 1/1. When Obsessive Skinner enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, not another, so it can hit itself. Delirium. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if you have Delirium, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. This is fine. It's a 2/2 for 2 when you want it to be. So it's at least a C. It's at least a 2/2 for 2 because you can just put the counter on itself. Otherwise, it's making your big evasive creature better. That flyer that your opponent doesn't have a blocker for, it's got a counter on it. That Skulk creature that can't be blocked just yet, and if it has a counter on it, it still can't be blocked, it's got a counter on it. Whatever you need has a counter on it. That's very versatile. I really like that. That makes this a C+ at a minimum. The Delirium would be amazing. If you can turn on Delirium, this thing just goes crazy. This just, you know, the ceiling on this thing is huge if you can enable Delirium to any real level of consistency. You know my opinion on that. I'm not going to rehash it here. So I am going to keep this at a C+. It's not a bomb by any shape of the imagination, and you're not going to go out of your way to get this, but I'll play it all the time because it is a bare minimum 2/2 for 2. And when it's applicable, I can get this on evasive things, so C+. Next up, we have Pack Guardian. Pack Guardian is 2 green for a creature wolf spirit at uncommon. It's a 4/3. It's got flash. When Pack Guardian enters the battlefield, you may discard a land card. If you do, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. It's a 4/3 for 4. That's Summit Prowler, which is fine. Summit Prowler was 2 red for a 4/3. This is 2 green for a 4/3. Getting flash makes it awesome because then it can function as removal against a decent number of creatures, or even just kill a 2/2 or an X2. Being able to get a land into your graveyard for the Delirium and get a 2/2 in addition, that's also just super good. This thing just seems solid. Seems super solid. Seems similar to Duskwatch Recruiter, a high pick that I think is never going to be first pickable, but I'm going to be always happy to play it. I'm going to be always happy to have it, and I'm going to be always happy to play it. So B-. Quilled Wolf is up next. Quilled Wolf is a 1 and a green creature wolf at common. It's a 2/2 for 5 and a green. Quilled Wolf gets +4/+4 until end of turn. It's a 2/2 with an upside later in the game. There is very little else that I can say about this card. It has a relevant subtype of wolf, which may come into play with all of the things that care about wolves and werewolves. But yeah, it's a 2/2 for 2, and late in the game, you can make this a 6/6. Probably never going to make this a 10/10. I don't see you having 12 mana all that often, but it's a total definition of a C+. It's totally playable on turn 2, and it's got some relevancy later in the game. It's not amazing. It's not going to win you games. It's not going to be the card that you write home about, but you're going to play it, and you're going to be happy with it. C+. Next up, we have Rabid Bite. Rabid Bite is 1 and a green for a sorcery at common. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to creature you don't control. Yeah, this is Fall of the Hammer. Fall of the Hammer is almost back. Fall of the Hammer was 1 and a red for an instant that did this effect. Being sorcery hurts this a little bit, but it's still just a solid B. One-sided fights are always fantastic, especially in green. If you're in green, you want these. Multiples even. You'll play as many of these as you can get. Love this card. It's Fall of the Hammer at sorcery speed, which is still just pretty darn fantastic. So, solid B. Next up, we have Root Out. Root Out is 2 and a green for a sorcery at common. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Investigate. D. Just definition of a D. Just like Naturalize, just like Natural State, just like every single destroy artifact or enchantment card. This is sideboard only. There is no reason you should ever main deck this card. There just are not enough enchantments or artifacts that are going to be consistently played by everybody for you to have this in your main deck. Once you see an artifact or an enchantment that you just cannot answer, side this in. Otherwise, keep it in the sideboard. Solid D, definition of a D, D. Next up, we have Sage of Ancient Lore. Sage of Ancient Lore is 4 and a green for a creature, human, shaman, werewolf. At rare, it is a star. Sage of Ancient Lore's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand. When Sage of Ancient Lore enters the battlefield, draw a card. And then, of course, it has the Werewolf flip ability. On the backside, we have Werewolf of Ancient Hunger, which is a creature werewolf, star. It has Vigilance, it has Trample, and Werewolf of Ancient Hunger's power and toughness are each equal to the total number of cards in all players' hands. And it has the Werewolf flip back ability. I don't super care for Sage of Ancient Lore. Having a giant handful of cards is amazing to have in Limited, but it's just not something that you pull off all that often unless you're in blue-black control, unless you're in the game of playing counter spells and removal spells and being a reactive kind of control-y deck, which is not what green ever wants to be doing. If I'm in green and I have a handful of cards, I'm either losing really badly or winning really solidly. This is going to be so frequently a tiny little 2/2, maybe a 3/3 for 5 mana, that I just don't really want to play it. What's worse is that this is a dead card if it's the only card in your hand. Because you play this, it's a 0/0. The trigger to draw a card goes on the stack. It dies due to state-based actions, and then you draw a card. It's literally dead in your hand. You cycle it for 5 mana if this is the only card in your hand. I don't want to be picking and playing 5 mana cards that may be just cycling in certain game states. And, you know, by the time you're casting 5-drops, you don't usually have a handful of cards anyways. Yeah, if this flips over, maybe it gets to be a mid-sized creature usually. But even then, it's probably not going to be all that big. I'm just not a big fan of Sage of Ancient Lore. I think there's way too much variability on it, and I think it's going to be way too weak for the mana cost way too often. Keep this for EDH, where when you flip it, it counts 4 different players' hands and things like that. But in Draft, in Sealed, this isn't for me. Yeah, C-. I might give it a try at some point, but I'm going to cut it pretty regularly. I'm not going to go lower than a C-, but C-. Next up, we have Seasons Past. Seasons Past is 4 green for a sorcery at Mythic. Return any number of cards with different converted mana costs from your graveyard to your hand. Put Seasons Past on the bottom of its owner's library. I am really torn on this card. I'm really torn. I'll tell you right from the start, I'm torn between C+ and D. 6 mana needs to be a really amazing effect. And if I return a land, a 1-drop, a 2-drop, a 3-drop, a 4-drop, a 5-drop, and a 6-drop to my hand, this card's amazing for 6 mana. If I return a land and a 2-drop and a 4-drop, this is okay for 6 mana, but not amazing. For me, you know the old refrain that I say, this is just too random for me. There's so little control over what I get to return when I have this card in my hand and it becomes castable. Yeah, I can hold on to it, but if I'm just holding a card that I don't want to play, that's not how I like to play Magic either. It just feels way too random for me. You might get back 1 card, you might get back 7, who knows. Obviously, this has absolutely no home in Delirium, because this will turn your Delirium off, most likely, depending on what you're pulling. Yeah, I don't know about this. I see some pretty high grades out there. I've seen this given a B+, a B. I've seen some high grades out there. But I'm so torn between C+ and D. I can see the upside of this, but I can see the downsides as well. All I know is that it's a Mythic that I'm going to feel bad about opening, because at its best, I don't think it's that good. I think it's just kind of okay-ish. I think the D has to win out for me just because of the randomness of it, just because you do not know if your graveyard is going to be a nice ladder of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or if it's just going to be 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. So because of the randomness, I've got to go with D. I don't really want to play this card. I don't want to go for it. Probably has a place in Constructed of some sort of format, EDH or Standard or who knows. But in Draft, in Sealed, I think I'm out on it. I'm going to let D win out on this one for me. Next up, we have Second Harvest. Second Harvest is 2 green for an instant at rare. For each token you control, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that permanent. No. If you can build a good token deck, then yeah, this is kind of nifty. But I don't know what that token deck's going to be. It's not going to be the 1/1 insects from the Creeping Sensation. It could be human tokens. I don't think green-white spirits is really going to be a thing to get the spirit tokens going, but maybe you've got some of them kicking around. Maybe you could copy some devils. You can obviously copy clue tokens. This copies all tokens. They don't have to be creatures. But I just don't see this being something that goes off reliably in Draft. It's going to be an awesome story if you do go off with it, and it's going to be a fun thing to try when the format gets a little bit stale. But I don't think this is going to be competitive, and it's not something that I'm going to jump into from the get-go. So I've got to go with a D on it. I think it's a build around. I think if you really want to do this, you're going to need to pack one pick on it, and you're going to need to go hard into tokens. And I don't know if that's going to be a good idea. So I'm on D on this. Maybe in Eldritch Moon, we're going to have an even bigger token theme or something like that. Or maybe this is just a card for EDH. So D. Next up, we have Silverfur Partisan. Silverfur Partisan is 2 and a green for a creature wolf warrior at rare. It's a 2/2, it's got trample, and whenever a wolf or a werewolf you control becomes the target of an instant or sorcery spell, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. This is kind of cute, but remember just how underwhelming Zada was, how nearly impossible it was to really go off with her in Limited? Well, the same applies here. And instead of doing something like getting 4 or 5 copies of Brute Strength, you're getting a wolf. You're just getting a 2/2 wolf. Doesn't seem worth it at all to me. Constructed, I can't wait for the Zada Silver Fur deck to happen. But in Limited, it's just not going to be all that worth it to play a 2/2 for 2 with Trample. I don't know exactly why it has Trample while being a 2/2, but it's not really worth it to get the, 2 wolves that you'll get out of this, maybe 3 wolves max in most decks. Just not really worth it. Not going to be something to bother with. So I'm going to cut this more often than not, and I'm not going to pick it very highly. C-. Next up, we have Solitary Hunter. Solitary Hunter is 3 and a green for a creature, human, warrior, werewolf, common, 3/4, with no ability other than the flip ability. On the backside, we've got One of the Pack, a creature, werewolf, 5/6, with no abilities other than the flip back ability. So we have the purest of vanilla werewolves, a 3/4 for 4 that becomes a 5/6 for 4. 3/4 for 4 is all right. It's a little bit better than the traditional 3/3 for 4. Not by too much, but it is better. Sometimes being a 5/6, though, with a relevant creature type is enough to say C+. Playable most of the time, if unexciting. If you have enough 4-drops, if you have better 4-drops, don't play this. But otherwise, it's totally fine, totally at home. C+, slightly better than average. Next up, we have Soul Swallower. Soul Swallower is 2 green for a creature, worm, rare, 3/3 trample. It has Delirium at the beginning of your upkeep. If you have Delirium, put 3 +1/+1 counters on Soul Swallower. A 3/3 for 4 is all right. Of course, is the Hill Giant. Double green. Hurts a little tiny bit, but not too bad. If you've got Delirium, you've got yourself a 6/6 if this lives through the turn. And then you've got yourself a 9/9 if it lives through the turn, and then ideally you just have the game. Again, this depends on the likelihood of getting Delirium. If it's reliable, this thing is going to get out of control fast. If you can get Delirium online and then put this on turn 4, you're going to be getting out of control ridiculously fast. If it's not reliable, you're of course overpaying slightly for a 3/3 because of that double cost. If this was 3 and a green, I think it would be just fantastic, but as it is, I've got to go with a C+ on it with my current hesitancy on Delirium. If my hesitancy proves to be wrong and Delirium is just something you basically always have online or you can very reliably build for without hurting the quality of your deck, then this will go up higher, maybe even a B-. You know what? Let's be optimistic for once. Let's go with a B- on this card, assuming that Delirium is something that you can reliably build for. Next up, we have Stoic Builder. Stoic Builder is 2 and a green for a creature, human at common. It's a 2/3. When Stoic Builder enters the battlefield, you may return target land card from your graveyard to your hand. What is it with cards returning lands from the graveyard? Why is that a thing? We want to be putting lands into the graveyard. We want to be enabling Delirium. Why are we pulling them back out? Is it insurance in case we need lands and we've already got 2 or 3 in there? Is this meant to interact with fetch lands or something so that you can fetch again? Is this a mechanic that's going to show up next set? Why is this effect in here? I'm not quite sure. This is really slow, though. I just don't really see a reason to play this card. It's a 2/3 for 3, which is already not the best of abilities, and it's going to get a land card from my graveyard to my hand, so it doesn't even go to the battlefield or anything. It's not going to ramp me. It just gets a card that I've already thrown away. I don't see the point. I don't see the point. I don't see the point of this playing this card. It just seems like a card that is pure filler and even slightly below filler because it's a 2/3 for 3. C-. If I have to play this as a 23rd card, sure, but I don't really see the point of this. Just like Groundskeeper Willie back a ways. So C-. Next up, we have Thornhide Wolves. Thornhide Wolves is 4 and a green for a 4/5 creature wolf, totally vanilla at common. No abilities whatsoever, just a 4/5. This is your usual kind of Canopy Gorger of the set. This is your big, dumb green creature that you generally shouldn't play, but if you didn't quite get a bomb or you didn't quite get a curve topper or you need one more slightly big thing, here it is. You can get it. You can probably get this last pick or pretty close to last pick. Don't waste a pick on it. Pick it up when you need it. C-. You should cut this generally. As a side note, it is a wolf, so it does have a relevant subtype, but still, you should generally cut this, I think. C-. Next up, we have Tireless Tracker. Tireless Tracker is 2 and a green for a creature human scout at rare. It's a 3/2. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on Tireless Tracker. This is just pure upside on a fairly okay body. 3/2 for 3 is slightly weaker in green than it is in other colors, like red, but you can pretty quickly start making this thing better. Basically guaranteed clues for at least a few turns is pretty nice as well, unless, of course, you're totally mana screwed. I don't think this is balmy by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it is a solid creature and a decently high pick. It's below some premium uncommons and commons, of course, premium removal and stuff, but I think it's a high pick, and I think it's one of the cards that the Clues Matter deck needs. You need a reason to be pumping out a bunch of clues other than drawing cards, and this, of course, becoming a giant thing eventually, a 4/3, a 5/4, a 6/5 would be a reason, so... yeah, pretty good card. I'm going to go with B+ on it. I think it's just pure upside on a decent body. Will the Clues Matter deck be a competitive archetype? I'm not sure, but B+ for Tireless Tracker. Up next, we have Traverse the Ulvenwald. Traverse the Ulvenwald is a single green mana for a sorcery at rare. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. Delirium, if you have Delirium, instead search your library for a creature or land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So this is the absolute litmus test for Delirium, I think. If Delirium's hard to pull off, this card is a late pick. When you know you're splashing a color and you want to make sure that you can do it. And you want to pay a green to go and get that one mountain that you have in your deck, or that one swamp, or whatever it is that you're splashing for. If Delirium's easy to pull off, then this is the cheapest tutor that we've seen in Magic in a decade or more. If Delirium's easy to pull off, you can go and get your best creature on turn 1 or turn whatever and put it straight into your hand. And that's powerful. That's really powerful. You know my opinion on Delirium right now, so I'm going to start a little bit down on this card. I'm going to expect that this a little bit more often than I would want it to is just going to go and get myself a land. But if this can go and get a creature, any creature from my entire deck reliably, then this is significantly better. But I'm going to start at a C+ on this. Yeah, this I think is going to be my litmus test, at least, for Delirium. So C+ for now. We'll see how it goes. Next up, we have Ulvenwald Hydra. Ulvenwald Hydra is 4 green for a creature Hydra at Mythic. It's a star. It's got reach. Ulvenwald Hydra's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. When Ulvenwald Hydra enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a land card, not basic, just land. Put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. 6 mana, double green is historically a tough place to be at. 4 color needs to be ridiculous to be truly balmy, and if it's not, then it often ends up just not being cast or simply not being impactful enough. This is, assuming no mana dorks or mana rocks were used, a 7/7 for 6 with reach. Because you pay 6, you get a land, makes it a 7/7. It's not the worst, and it gets bigger as you play more lands, but you can't expect it to reliably get too much bigger. You don't have 15 lands in play in your average limited match. You have 7, 8, 9 maybe. Unfortunately, without trample or something, this doesn't end the game for quite a while. Your opponent can chump block this for days. Ultimately, I think it's fine, and it's probably first pickable, but barely so. I think ultimately I'd prefer a B+ here. But I wouldn't be upset giving it A-. Nothing above that, though. Without trample, without evasion, without some way of this ending the game right away without, having to attack and get through that 2/2 and get through those 3 1/1s and get through that 0/4. I don't see it being much more than a B+. So B+, I think it's first pickable. It's going to be big. It's going to be splashy, but it may take a little while for you to end the game with it. Next up, we have Ulvenwald Mysteries. Ulvenwald Mysteries is 2 and a green for an enchantment at uncommon. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, investigate. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a 1/1 white human soldier creature token onto the battlefield. This is a decent token generator. Maybe there's a build-around deck for it. Maybe you do the Ulvenwald Mysteries, Second Harvest, Clue Token, flood the board with 1/1s, and then double the amount of 1/1s that you have. Maybe that's something you could do. I think it's probably going to be a little bit too slow generally. That being said, I'm going to keep my eye on this card as being one of the potential kind of spider spawning type decks where, in a month or two, somebody suddenly breaks the format wide open with this card. I could maybe see it happening. I'm not too optimistic about it, and I probably won't be the one to give it a try. I'm going to start on a C on Ulvenwald Mysteries. I think it's just going to be kind of a decent extra little bit of bonuses that you get here and there off of those clue tokens. I don't think it's amazing by any stretch of the imagination, unless it suddenly breaks the format. But I'm going to start on a C on it, but I'm going to keep my eye on it. Vessel of Nascency is up next. It is a single green mana for an enchantment at common. Pay 1 and a green, sacrifice Vessel of Nascency. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker card from among them into your hand. Put the rest into your graveyard. I kind of like the Vessel of Nascency. I'm not sure if I like this one a little bit more than Paramnesia or not. So this one, you get to look at the top 4, and you get to pick the card that you most want, and at the same time, pick the 3 cards that are going to go to your graveyard. With Paramnesia, you just flip 3 off the top, and then you draw 1. So the blind draw from Paramnesia, Vessel of Paramnesia that is nice because you can't not get it. You could potentially reveal 4 instants and sorceries off this and not get a single card. That's super duper unlikely, though. This one I think does ever slightly win out because you really get your choice of what's going to the graveyard for Delirium and what's going to your hand for actual value. Outside of a Delirium deck, I don't really care for this. Of course, if you don't have anything that really desperately needs Delirium, I don't think you're going to play this, really. It's kind of slow and a lot of mana to get a slight dig effect out of it. But in that Delirium deck, I think this is going to be a pretty solid way to enable Delirium, and I think it's probably ever so slightly better than the blue Vessel. So C+. I think if you are in the market for a Delirium enabler, if you're not, of course, I think this is much more like a D. Next up, we have Veteran Cathar. Veteran Cathar is 1 and a green for a creature human soldier at uncommon. It's a 2/2, pay 3 and a white. Target human gains double strike until end of turn. It's a bear with a pretty useful and relevant late game ability. Just like Quilled Wolf, I totally want to play this. I want to play this on turn 2, and I want to play this on turn 6 and activate it. Now, of course, unlike Quilled Wolf, this is significantly more playable in green-white and significantly less good, still 100% playable, but much less good in green anything else. In green anything else, it's just a bear. If I'm in green-white, it's significantly better. So I'm going to go with a C+ on it, assuming you're in green-white. If you're not, it is just a C. Next up, we have Watcher in the Web. Watcher in the Web is 4 and a green for a creature spider at common. It's a 2/5. It's got reach, of course. It is a spider. And Watcher in the Web can block an additional 7 creatures each combat, 1 for each leg. It's, odds are you're going to block 2 creatures with this. It's not all that common that you're going to block a whole lot of extra ones than that unless you're holding off a team, basically fogging them. It's a little bit pricey for what it does. 5 mana for a 2/5 spider. Not super what I want, but it does really hold off kind of the army of 2/2s that are coming at you. You can block them pretty profitably for a little bit. I'd love if this was a 4-drop that was a 2/4 with this ability. But yeah, maybe that's just way too much better than Giant Spider and Giant Mantis. Still, if you need to block flyers, this is your man. Make sure that you know that you have this in the sideboard. The cost really pulls me off of it being a totally main deckable card, but I do still think it is kind of fine. I'm willing enough to give this a C rather than a C-. But I personally think I'll probably leave this in the sideboard a little bit more often. The final green card is Weirding Wood. Weirding Wood is 2 and a green for an enchantment aura at uncommon. Enchant land. When Weirding Wood enters the battlefield, investigate. Enchanted land has tap. Add 2 mana of any color to your mana pool. So you could tap that land for 1 mana, or you could tap that land for 2 mana, which will probably be your choice most of the time. These effects are often sort of okay, and they really help you head down the 3, 4, even 5 color deck, good stuff kind of route. Is that going to be doable in this format? I don't know. The format looks ever so slightly fast. I'm not sure, but if it is, this card will certainly be a big help. If you're not going to go for that, then, and you're just playing kind of a traditional 2-color deck, you probably want to avoid this. So C minus. It's not something you want to play all the time. It's something you want to play when you're being a little bit cute, a little bit splashy, going into other colors, going into, 3, 4, 5 color good stuff. So C minus. If you need this, you'll probably know, but otherwise you probably don't want to play it. So that's going to wrap it up for green. Green's interesting. Green has a lot of utility and kind of sideboard cards. Green often does have that. Green has the naturalizes and the plummets and the reach creatures that aren't necessarily good in the main deck. It also has some amazing cards, some cards that I'm really excited to play. Things like Tireless Tracker I'm really interested in, and Deathcap Cultivator, despite the fact that it is a rare and I wish it was something smaller. But green is, it's looking like an interesting color. It's looking like it's a little bit split between wolves and clues, and is arguably being the support color in a wolves deck. We'll see how it shapes out. I think it's better than blue for sure, but I don't think it holds a candle to red. But we'll see. We'll see. There's some cards in here that I like. There's some solid just bears as well. Some solid just totally playable creatures. So yeah, I'm excited to see how green shapes up. But let me know what you think of green. Let me know what you think your favorite card is. Let me know what you think of my reviews, and discuss amongst yourselves as well. There's been a fantastic number of comments, and this is shaping up to be the best set review that I've had stats-wise. So thank you all for that. There's going to be one more video tomorrow. It's going to be all of the multicolored cards, the colorless cards, and the land cards, which I suppose are also colorless cards. So stay tuned for that. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at The Mana Leak. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/The Mana Leak. You've already found me here on YouTube. You've got that comment section down below. Please make use of that. As well, if you enjoy my videos, click that little thumbs up icon to let me know that you like them, to let the world know that you like them, and keep them rising up through the ranks. As well, if you haven't subscribed, you should. There's a link below each video. There's one in the outro of each video, and clicking that will keep you up to date on all the latest videos the second that they get posted. You want to know when that set review goes up tomorrow. You want to know when the pre-release recap goes up. You want to know when you can watch behind my shoulder the first draft of Shadows over Innistrad next Friday. So you want to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. So click that button if you haven't. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow.